Well, hello and welcome. This is Marie Robeson, and this is my very first podcast episode. I am so excited to finally being able to share with you my passion project, something that I have been working on for quite some time, and the list of people that I have for you is epic. I cannot wait for you to hear about all of these incredibly talented and very interesting people. Starting with today's episode, I'll be interviewing my really good friend, MJ Hughes, who was the former Vice President of Product Development for Pottery Barn in Williams-Sonoma. And we have a very special story about the two of us and how we met, and it actually really ties into this podcast in quite a lovely way. So I'm super excited to share that with you. Not only did MJ work for Pottery Barn in Williams-Sonoma, but she's worked with Restoration Hardware, with Esprit, with a lot of different companies. And she's just a magical, wonderful being. She has now gone off and started her own collection, and we are so excited to have some of that in our Give Back category. Also, she is going to be featured over on my blog, so you can see some of the really beautiful pieces of artwork that she's now creating currently and a little bit more about her story. There'll be links to the show notes and also ways that you can contact and support MJ and purchase her artwork, as well as the contact and way that you can purchase her artwork in the Give Back category. And just so you know, that's a link under my website. She's allowed me 3 pieces of artwork where she receives a small commission, but the remaining funds go to the Louise Monforte Art Educational Scholarship so that we can support the next generation of artists. So it's just really a fun win-win all the way around. So pour yourself a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, glass of wine, whatever it is that you love to have as your favorite libation, and join me for a most fascinating podcast with my dear friend MJ. Hi, everybody. I am here today with one of my most absolute favorite people on the planet Earth. Her name is Marie Joie Hughes. Did I say that right, MJ?
It's Marie Joie.
Marie Joie. So see, I already said it wrong.
So, you can just call me MJ. I think that'd be easier.
And that's what I've always called you because I can't say it as beautifully as you have. So, but I'm here with her today, and she is such an amazing, incredible artist. She has been in the home decor industry doing design work for some of the top companies. And I cannot wait to dive into speaking with you, MJ, about all your journey and how that's evolved for you. But I really think what's super interesting is if we could start with how we met, because it's very relevant to the podcast being named Love Lulu, named after my sister Louise, and she's the reason why we met. So I would love to tell that story because I think it's pretty fascinating, actually.
Well, it's a great story, and I owe it all to the fact I never learned how to drive. So I always take public transportation.
Which is, you live in San Francisco. So let's make that clear. That makes a lot of sense to not have to drive in San Francisco.
Yes. And so I live way out by the ocean, and Louise lived only a couple blocks away. And I met Louise at the Express bus stop. In front of the Safeway, right by the ocean.
I know it well.
Yeah. And so that was a bus that would skip half of San Francisco and go straight to the downtown section. And so, Louise and I are there. It's 6:30 in the morning. And, it's only the two of us at the bus stop.
Really?
Yeah, early in the morning.
How funny. Where's all the other business people going downtown?
Well, we would catch the first bus.
Wow.
So
I didn't know that.
Usually it was just us. Occasionally there would be a one or two other people, but since we were the real early birds, and
that's smart.
Yeah. So, we just would make small talk. And then she asked what I did one day, and I told her, and she said, "Oh, my sister Marie is a fantastic graphic designer." And
so let's tell her what did you tell her that you did? What was your job?
I told her I was a textile designer.
Kind of downplaying the fact of who you were.
Well, I mean, I didn't want to say, yeah, I'm the vice president of the product development studio at Williams-Sonoma and Pottery Barn. That sounds really snotty.
Yeah,
So, I'm an artist and a designer. But then when she started telling me what you did, Marie, I was like, does your sister want to work for Pottery Barn? Because I'm looking for some really good graphic designers. And at the time, we were looking for new artists and new hands.
I just can't believe it. I mean, the whole thing is like, and for the people who are listening to know, so MJ at the time was the president or vice president of product development for the studios for both Williams-Sonoma and Pottery Barn. And that title of that person, you are like the unicorn. Like you can't find who that person is that's has that job. So it's not like you can just submit your portfolio, because you are very quiet on social media. Like there's no way to actually find you. So to have you're talking to my sister, it's just was this crazy coincidence, I think.
Well, and I'm pretty outgoing, and I also, because I'm an artist, first of all, I really believe in connecting with artists.
That's what I love about you. Me
which
too.
is not what most corporate executives do. And
Correct.
honestly, in all the top companies, and as a freelancer now, it is extremely difficult to get a hold of those people in those jobs.
Exactly.
And those companies purposely protect the executives in design for a lot of reasons, because you can get like thousands of people. If they can find you, they will hound you all day long.
Yeah.
So there is actually a good reason why we're kept pretty sequestered. You're not really supposed to be on social media.
That's so interesting, and that's part of I think why a lot of designers who are trying to get to know those people, they find that little bit of a struggle. And for me to have that opportunity was, this chance friendship that you had with my sister was really incredible. I mean, I remember getting the email from her, and she was saying, oh, I have a friend that I take the bus with, and here's her business card. You might want to contact her. And I'm like reading it. I think I was in Marshall's or something. And I'm like, what the heck? And then I was like, that seriously, like, you're the magical unicorn. I couldn't believe like that happened. And you really are magical after I got to know you. And I sat there and I remember I was like, well, what the heck? I'm going to give her a call. And you picked up the phone. I remember you picking it up going, this is MJ. I was absolutely expecting like 3 assistants to pick up or something and never even getting to speak with you. And then you were so sweet. And I've loved you ever since. It's been
vice versa. But, also, the fact I even became a corporate executive in my career was something I never, 1, that was never a goal. 2, I never thought it would happen. And I used to joke, I have this astrologer who I've gone to for years. And I was like, okay, I got this corporate gig. And I kept getting promoted, and I was like, this has got to be like a bad joke. And she laughed because she said, you are the last person on earth who should be in a corporate situation.
That's kind of funny because it's true. Like you didn't have that persona that I would have expected for the title that you had and for the things that you had achieved at that point in your career. You were very much very different than what I would have expected. In fact, the whole experience of going to the offices at Pottery Barn and walking in there was completely mind-blowing for me. I felt like I was walking into a movie set and so many talented people. And you were overseeing all of these artists at the time.
Yes. Well, it was like a movie set, and that was the whole thing because they're creating the lifestyles.
Yeah, right. And you were a pivotal person and have been for the past 30, 35 years in that whole setup. So I want to let's go way back to the very beginning because we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit. And I really want to talk about your journey and how it all started. And so have you always been from San Francisco?
Yep.
You grew up there?
I was raised in the Haight-Ashbury.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my mom's family was here. They've been here since the 1920s, the French side of my family. So, yeah, I grew up here. I've been drawing since I was 2. I'm sure you were the same way. You know, I've always...
We all loved it, right?
Yeah, that's all I really did.
I love that when you were little, you would take out the historical fashion books from the library and you would make paper dolls out of that. Like, I wish I had some of those paper dolls.
I wish I did too. I don't have them anymore. I mean, I spent hours, days, months doing.
Wow. I love that.
Them, which, you know, oddly enough, that training, and it wasn't really training, it was sort of a self-imposed passion, is what enabled me later on to be able to identify different types of patterns, like knowing the history behind the patterns, what period. So it gave me sort of an encyclopedia that I could always go to, you know, in any design situation. And it's something I still call on.
Right, right. So you identify mostly with being a textile designer, with
I mean, that's
artist.
How I started. I mean, I started as an illustrator, and my true love was costume design. So I wanted to become a costume designer.
And I love these sketches. I can't believe you were 18 when you did these costume design sketches. They're just gorgeous. And I'll have all of these images will be on my blog so people can also see how gorgeous they are. But it's interesting. You did these when you were 18, but I still see the same person here with you years later in your artwork. It really has a very unique voice, and it had a unique voice then, and it still has a unique voice now, which I think a lot of young designers struggle with, that kind of finding who they are and just feeling comfortable with that, you know?
Well, it's also really hard when you have a unique voice to get into corporate or designing for, you know, the mass consumer. And I don't mean mass necessarily as low end, but when you are designing for a lot of people and you have a very unique vision, it's actually very difficult.
So do you feel like it gets a little bit more watered down, or?
It gets way, way watered down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you really have to be willing to let go of that. You know, It's a fine balance of keeping your voice true to who you are, but also realizing you have to reach a lot of other people who do not have the same point of view you do.
Right, right.
And that's the balance. And it's really understanding what people want. I mean, Marie, you do this, you have a very strong voice that's yours, but you reach so many people.
Right. And you can see like where the engagement is the highest. It's usually something that's very on trend at the time, you know, instead of like maybe something that's really meaningful for me may not do very well social media wise, but it doesn't matter. And that doesn't stop me from that, but I can see how that could hinder a younger designer in really just sticking with who they are and finding out who they are as an artist. So you started in costume design, and did you do costume design? You said that was your passion.
When I went to art school, I studied illustration. I was never a great seamstress. I'm way too impatient to be a great seamstress.
Yeah.
I'm really good at faking it, especially for costumes. But I was, when I started art school, I was very lucky to get an apprenticeship with a woman named Betsy Lamont, who was a friend of my parents' friends. And because I painted and drew and could use gouache paint, she had me as her apprentice. So I went to school for a year, and then I got a very, very serious case of mononucleosis when I actually had to quit art school. Drop out because I was sick for 9 months. So Betsy offered me a job when she was the head textile designer for Esprit Decor way back in the 80s. And so I got a job designing for Esprit Kids, and I kept working, and I never went back to school.
So that was a really an amazing introduction, because Esprit at the time, and I don't know if the people listening to this are our age, but was really quite a cutting edge fashion brand. I mean, their branding wasn't it something like for every color, or like they were very, I remember when they came out, they were just so unique and just, every bit. I mean, I remember wearing it. I loved it.
Oh, I mean, that was the thing you wore in there.
Yeah.
And so I was I've been so blessed in my life to meet so many wonderful people, and I do believe there are angels who help you. They come in very different forms, and in every situation,
I agree.
People help me. And so that's why I've always been very open, and I've always tried to help as many people because I've been helped, and I believe you have to give back.
Which is the whole premise of why I'm doing this. I love that. It's so meaningful that you're the first person that I have on this episode. I just love it so much. Okay, so you work for Esprit, which is incredible. And then why did you go to?
Well, Esprit, back in the day, they were a little nutty.
Yeah.
And they let go of the entire textile department after a year and a half because they got tired of them. And they hired a whole bunch of Japanese designers, which lasted about 3 or 4 months. So I went into theater, and I got an apprenticeship. And again, it was a friend of a friend who said, you need to call my friend Fritha, who ran the ACT costume department. And I got an apprenticeship. So I worked a year and a half in theater. And then, Betsy Lamont left Esprit, and she started her own studio again, and I got roped into textiles again. And, aside from doing side jobs in theater and, working on my husband's independent films and a couple other independent films, textiles was my main, way of making money.
I feel like I need like 5 hours to talk to you. I want to ask you all these questions and just that whole. So when did you meet your husband? He was
when I was 18.
Oh, really? And so was he also from San Francisco?
Oh, yeah. And he's a filmmaker. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So you guys were these young in love couple in the city, being creative, making stuff. That's so cool. I love it.
Yeah, it was financially.
Yeah, I'm sure, especially in San Francisco too.
But yes. Yes.
So do you think that the opportunities, I know you've met like a lot of great women and angels and people that were supporting you, mentors, but do you think that geographically living in San Francisco that opened up a lot of doors as well?
I think at the time it did, yes. San Francisco, well, I don't think for the interior design industry right now, San Francisco is necessarily the place. Before it was fashion, there were a lot of companies in San Francisco, a lot of fashion companies. Levi's is still here, but there's not that many companies anymore.
Wow.
A lot of small startups that are happening.
Right.
But I think I hear a lot of designers, young designers coming out of art school, they're moving to LA and New York.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. But because it was, I think also if you, in speaking to young designers, if you have a good, if you're utilizing social media, I think what happened with the connection with AI, with me and you, was I had a lot of images on my Instagram. So you could look right away and go, oh, this is somebody that maybe I could work with. So that it's important for young designers to be putting their work out there so that those people who are the head of, development of products can see who you are and if that's somebody that you can work with. So I do think geographically it would be great to be in those cities, but I don't think it's an end-all be-all now that we have these other platforms that we can share our artwork on.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I don't think it matters. I mean, I think, like, for instance, San Francisco is really great for the gaming industry. So for the designers who are designing for gaming, probably should be here. Because that's where all the companies are in the Bay Area.
And too, I think when you're younger, it's a good idea to work for a company and really kind of see how things work corporately, and then maybe pursue the freelance. It's hard, I would think, to just come right out the gate as a freelancer and hope that you're going to get picked up by a big corporation to design for them.
I mean, I think you're right, though. I think it's more possible because I keep seeing a lot of young designers and young illustrators out there on Instagram, and they are doing their own things, and they are being picked up by big companies because now those companies are looking at Instagram and looking at all the different websites, whereas even 2 years ago they weren't. And it's, everything is changing so quickly now, and it keeps changing, like, every few months.
Right. I know. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And it has changed. Like, I think definitely, like our younger years, that social media platform didn't exist. So it was a little bit more challenging to get into working for these companies. But it always does seem to come down to, who you know and who they know. And
I mean, in any, I think in any industry,
True.
Get in, it's really, you need somebody to vouch for you.
And you need to do the work. You got to show up, and you've got to keep doing the work and putting it out there. And if that's what you want to pursue, if you want to be a commercial artist, designer, then, you got to keep putting content out there. It's, it doesn't just land on your lap with 2 pictures posted.
No. And, I mean, the discipline of being a designer, as you know, Mari, it is not an easy road.
It's challenging.
You have to work hard.
Well, I think you have to love it. And if you love it, then, I wouldn't deter anybody from it, because if you love it, then it's going to be your biggest joy to keep putting work out there. And, everything's hard work, really. Well, wait a second. Do I want to say that? Is everything hard work? I mean, everything's work. If it has any sense of value to it, you've got to work.
I mean, I think a lot of people think, design is an easy way out, or, it. And the thing about working in any creative field, whether it's theater, film, dance, you have very long hours. I will tell, I mean, a lot of young designers I met out of art school were shocked at how hard we worked.
Exactly.
So
true.
I do want to tell young designers that, look, if you think this is going to be like some cute little artsy job, forget it, man, because it's very intense. And you do have to love it. And it is that passion that keeps you motivated and keeps you working long hours.
Right. It's true. That's absolutely true. I mean, and that's why you have to love it.
Yes, you better love it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. So you were doing costumes, and you were working on textiles, and working with the independent films. And then what happened? Then how did you move into working for?
Well, because I was working for different clients who all actually, different people who knew the woman who trained me, Betsy Lamont. I worked with a woman named Mary Brittenrose who went to Gardner's Eden, and then from Gardner's Eden, she went to Restoration Hardware, and I took a corporate job after 17 years of working freelance after Esprit.
Wow. And you were freelancing for Esprit. You weren't?
No. So I was at Esprit full time. That was my
corporate
job. I was 20 or 19.
Got it.
And then after that, I was like, nope, not doing that again. And I worked freelance for a long time. And then I was actually offered a position at Pottery Barn, and I was offered a position at Restoration. And I went with Restoration because I could design all sorts of products, not just textiles. And they're only textile surface designer, and I did everything from dinnerware to illustrations for packaging to designing house paint colors.
Oh, wow.
So I designed a lot of the restoration house paint colors back in the day.
Wow. And, back in the day is when they were really strong.
Well, this was when they were like kid friendly and they had dogs in the catalog. This is not the restoration hardware.
It's so different now. That's true. Yeah.
So, and then restoration changed quite a bit, and I left restoration and I was offered a position at Pottery Barn, and it was just to manage bedding, which means I wouldn't be designing textiles. I would just be doing production and going to the factories, which is what I wanted to do more of. But of course, a week later, a week into the job, I wound up running the studio and doing textiles and doing So
they're like, oh, look, she's creative. Let's have her manage everybody.
Yeah. I'm like, we need somebody to manage all the designers. Of course, I didn't get that title for many years. I just did it.
I see. And you could speak the language. So the designers all understood you because you were one of them. So,
yeah. And you have to be an artist to be able to manage artists, and
absolutely,
and that each artist works differently, and you have to speak to them differently to get them to do their best.
Absolutely.
And that's really what it's about. People don't realize that a position of leadership is really about service, and it's about taking care of the people you're responsible for. And
you were very, very excellent at that. I mean, I feel like you were very much all about that support. And I also felt like the period that I worked with you, it was I couldn't believe how in sync we were with our phone calls. Like, I haven't heard from her in 3 days, but now I'm ready to talk to her because I have this done. And you're like, okay, you have that done, right? And it was like the timing. It was like we kind of just would know, like, I'm going to do what you asked me to do. You're going to go do your thing, and then we're going to meet back here. And the timing was always uncanny, I felt. But I'm sure, that's probably how you were with everybody. You kind of knew when to give them space, let them create, let them do their thing, and when that you needed to go, okay, the deadline is now, and we have to have it. So,
well, you were on top of it. I mean, I've dealt with some really wonderful artists who are way out in hyperspace. They're brilliant, but you're like, okay, so I know you're a genius, but we really have a deadline here.
Well, that's a really good point too, because I think that it's helpful to not just be a creative or an artist, but to also understand the business aspect, that there are deadlines, that this is a job, and that, it's important that this looks a certain way. And maybe it's not exactly how you want it to look, your voice, going back to that part of that conversation. And maybe it is a little watered down, but a lot of people are going to really love it. So you've got to, kind of step out of your ego and create what this job particular is for, So I think that's hard for a lot of artists, because I think they're like, this is my style, this is the way I'm doing it, and I'm not going to alter it in any way, shape, or form, take it or leave it.
Yeah, there are some. But, I had to answer to my boss, who ran all of product development, and then her bosses, who were the CEO and the brand presidents. So, I wasn't doing it for my own good.
Right.
It was for, I was responsible to the people who hired me, who were above me. And, I was responsible to the people who I managed, but we also had to deliver the goods to the executives.
Right. And I remember when I walked through the offices with you, and my jaw, after I picked up my jaw off the ground, because it was so beautiful with those like floor to ceiling windows. And just so everybody knows, like, those designs are created there. The artists there were amazing. And I remember seeing you, I'm like, oh my God, those pillows are so gorgeous. And then speaking as the interior designer, Marie person, was like, why aren't those pillows in the catalog? And you're like, oh, those got cut. And I was like, oh my gosh, those are gorgeous. And just, what makes the cut, Sometimes they don't make it.
No, and that's what everybody in every design company, that's our reality.
You're right.
We produce, 10,000 designs, and maybe 200 get picked up in a year. It's really, people don't realize that all these companies, Ralph Lauren and all the retailers, go through so much design. And So the rejection rate is actually pretty high. And a lot of younger designers, like, because the girls who are running the product development studio now, they were my interns. They came out of art school.
Wow.
So I trained those designers. And I hired a lot of really young, talented artists out of art school who had no idea how to work for corporate. And one of the biggest learning curves was the rejection rate.
Wow.
Like, you can't pay attention to it.
Yeah.
You just have to keep creating. And to keep people creative in those very difficult situations is not easy.
I bet. I think this is great information, even for somebody who, let's say, they're an independent Etsy store owner and they're creating product and they think it's just like the greatest thing ever and it doesn't sell. It's like, don't take it so personally. Certain things are going to hit people at a certain way, and it's okay if it didn't get that many likes on a certain post or something. That's part of creating. We just keep putting it out there, and don't just stop creating because someone didn't like it, like you felt it would do great. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it might do great in a year or two.
That's true too. Right.
We had that case where we had artwork that was beautiful, and then 3 years later we represented it because everybody forgot about it, and those became the best sellers. So you never know. Timing is everything. But I also think if we're going to put artwork out there, and we're not sitting here just to amuse ourselves, we really need to think about, okay, what do people like? What do people need? What resonates with people?
Exactly.
Because, even fine artists have to do what the gallery owners want or what their client wants. And so sure, there's artwork I do that's only for me, and it doesn't matter if anybody likes it or not. It's just my own thing.
Exactly.
But really, anything I do that I'm putting out in the world, I'm like, okay, who's going to buy this?
Right.
Who's going to relate to the story I'm telling?
Exactly. And that's what art is. It's a story. And there's a lot of meaning to it. And that's another reason why I wanted to do this podcast, is kind of educate people. I know when I was doing a lot of interior design, and we would get to the end of the designing the house, and it would be time to put artwork up, and they're like, oh, I found this print, or I found this. And I'm like, print? What are we talking about? Like, we need some original art in here, and you need to know who the artist is and what's the story behind the artwork. It will have so much more meaning for you, and it'll bring you so much more joy when you look at it, when you know all of these things. And it kind of, to bring it down real specific to you, is your artwork that you're creating now, and I'm gonna jump forward and jump back, but the artwork that you're creating now has a lot of symbolism in it, and I love that so much, because I like when artwork is multifaceted and it's not just something pretty to look at, but there's a story behind it and there's meaning to it. So I'm going to go there in a second, but I want to go back to the beginning. You started with Esprit, then you went independent, then you went working for Restoration Hardware, which brings you to Williams-Sonoma Pottery Barn, and now you are you're on your own and you're doing your own thing. So what does that look like for you now?
Mostly I'm designing and mentoring the product development teams for manufacturers overseas, and working as a design consultant and designing collections for manufacturers. But a lot of what I'm doing is working closely with the design teams that are part of the manufacturers. And most of them are, young designers. In India and in China. Mostly I'm working in India. I wanted to work very closely with the factories and the craftspeople who create the artwork and the product, because really that's where design starts. And each product takes an army of people to create. Like when you get your duvet in Shams, there's probably 100 people whose hands have touched that product. And I don't think people realize, and you don't realize until you work in the factories, that your design work is actually feeding hundreds, if not thousands, of families.
Wow.
And so you have a huge responsibility, actually, as a designer, to create product that does well, to keep those families fed.
Huh. Well, that takes it a whole nother level. That's interesting. Huh.
So, but, I mean, I realized that working in these factories, and like I say, I started working in the factories in Hong Kong way back in 1985.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. So when did that journey start for you? Was that with Esprit, or was that a little bit later? It was.
That was
they would send you then.
Because back in those days, like I say, we had to design for the factories. We had to design to do the screen separations, all of that, which they don't teach in design school anymore, is how to do the technical repeats and how to do the screen separations. And you have to think about what is technically possible. Now with digital printing, that's changed somewhat, but not really, because you still have to understand how is this product made, whether it's embroidered, whether it's quilted, appliqued, and very few designers understand that anymore.
That's really true. And that's interesting. I wonder why they're not teaching that anymore, if that's the case.
I don't know. I've talked to furniture designers and, furniture designers who've been furniture or design professors as well. And they said, yeah, it's true. It's, when you go to design school, they'll teach you theory, but they don't teach you how things are made. And really, you don't learn that until you're sitting in those places with those people who make it.
Mm.
And, people are like, oh, that inhibits your creativity. No, I actually use all the limitations as my design guidelines, and I design accordingly. And then when you know your limitations, you know what you can break, which rules you can break, and how you can change the game. It's like any artist. You got to know your medium.
Absolutely.
You don't know the medium you're working with.
Right.
You don't know how to get the best out of it.
So you started going overseas and you've been doing this for a long time. So you must have a lot of friends over there.
Yeah. And, because I'm working with basically people I've worked with for the past 20 years.
So are you now mainly doing, other than the beautiful artwork, are you doing, and you're doing pillows, and what other things are you doing?
Well, I'm doing wall art. So one of my manufacturer friends, said to me, listen, dummy, if you're going to get anywhere, you really need to do your own line. And Marie, you have been also telling me the same thing for years.
Yeah.
Rather than just designing collections for everybody else, I thought, okay, I'm going to do my own collection. But because I've always been studying the history of symbolism and magic in textiles, I'm putting a lot of conscious symbolism in the work that I'm doing.
And I love that so much. I just think that it makes artwork so much more interesting when there is some symbolism to it and some meaning to it. And anyway, I was going to go off on a tangent there, but I want you to know, if you don't mind sharing a little bit more about that, because I have these beautiful pieces that you're going to allow me to have a couple of them on the website for sale, so that for the month of September, the money will go to the scholarship fund for the next generation of artists. But there's such beautiful images of Buddha, and there's more things going on, and I know I'm kind of a newbie to it, so I don't really understand what they are. So why don't you kind of explain that a little bit for us?
Well, my whole interest in this started because reading the history of design and textiles, you realize that all these designs were actually created as magical amulets. Like even all the embroidery on the Ukrainian blouses, those are all protection symbols. So, of course, sacred art has always had deep, deep meaning. And, as I get deeper and deeper in studying this, and honestly, I really don't know that much. I keep learning, and it's endless. But, the shape of the square has been a sign of stability. And so the Tibetan Buddhist monks have these rugs called wanengs where they sit and meditate. They're squares. So it stabilizes them as they meditate. Triangles are the symbol of, reaching a goal, of aspirations. The pyramids. So all these shapes have meaning. Circles mean wholeness. It's endless. What even, the whole study of sacred geometry is a whole nother subject I'm just starting to touch. But it really made me realize that design is about healing. And,
I love that. That is so true.
Well, in certain cultures, it's actually what the shaman would do is draw these designs on fabric and then put them over a sick person and heal the person. In the Amazon, there's a tribe called the Shipibo Konebo. And literally, they do these very, very intricate energy patterns.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing.
They see them when they're on ayahuasca, and then later they translate those designs into the textiles, and the shaman will literally put these cloths over a sick person. So,
wow.
Learning about all of this, I was like, wait a minute. Actually, design is not just, a pretty pillow house. You really need to be healed. Well, you don't need to be, but a bonus would be.
Look, we can all use a little healing. That's, I mean, some years more than others, that's for sure. But still,
right. So
I'll take it any way, shape I can get it. If it's in my art form, I want it.
So then, the artwork I did is very specific to healing, prosperity, compassion. And, those are the themes I put in each design.
Oh, gosh. I love that so much. And I'll make sure that we have the description of those symbols on the blog post with the images, too, that are so pretty. I'm looking at them right now. They're so gorgeous. My sister, Louise, she loved lions. And so after she passed away, I painted, I can't even tell you how many lions. And it was a form of healing myself. It was a way to kind of reconnect or stay connected. And I decided for some random weird reason to paint one of my jean jackets with the lion on the back. And sometimes I feel like I'm wearing it as like armor. And sometimes it's like I'm wearing it like a hug. So it's true when you say that art heals, because I think it's such a powerful form. And, if we think about, like, what if the world didn't have art? If we didn't have that form to look at something beautiful that kind of reconnects us and taps us into our deep inner sense of what joy is, then, it'd be really a sad place. So I love that this is not just something I just made up. This is going back thousands of years here.
It goes back to the earliest men. I mean, the cave paintings in Lascaux were actually paintings that were prayers for abundance of the hunt. And they realized they weren't just random pictures. They actually have geometric symbols in them, and they realized because they were painted so deep in these caves that they actually had a very spiritual meaning for them. So when you start to study the history, like the history of rugs, each of those tribal rugs are magical symbols. And
wow. Yeah.
It's endless. And each society, I mean, the Chinese society, everything is symbolic.
And even like the Suzanis and the wedding, the wedding cloths, and the joining the families, and that it's one thing to look at something and it's just so beautiful, but then to know that there's this whole story behind it is when art really gets good.
Well, I mean, even pillows, I mean,
Yeah.
you can do it. We did this at Pottery Barn in Williams-Sonoma all the time. We infused the symbolism in the designs purposely because, of course, I was, always babbling on about it to the designers. They probably thought, oh, God, there goes that crazy old witch again. But, it was funny to see which designs would do well because they were infused with that intention and people sense it.
Yeah. They vibe on it. They feel it.
They gravitate and they may not know what the meaning is, but something deep, deep down in them calls to them. So, what I'm saying is not just a lot of hocus pocus. I'm actually saying, well, if you want to sell something from a practical point of view, make it resonate with people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's really good advice. So speaking of advice, gosh, I feel like I'm definitely going to need another couple episodes with you. There's so many things I could talk about with you. So what would be your advice? I mean, we've tapped on quite a bit of it, but what would be your advice that you would give a designer who is starting out? And let's say they do want to work kind of more commercially and they want to work for a company like Williams-Sonoma or Pottery Barn or a home goods company in the textile industry. What would be your advice for them?
Well, first of all, study what that product, what that company is selling. Really study their product line. Figure out how your voice fits in that product line and be persistent. Do not give up. I mean, I hired people who kept writing me emails after emails, and then 8 months later, I would be like, okay, come on in.
Well, how did they get your email? How did you get the magical unicorn's email?
Usually they knew somebody who knew me.
Oh, okay.
Or, they went through HR or something. Because it's not easy getting into any company. And,
right.
Well,
and maybe also knowing how the product is made is what I hear you saying, is that a lot of designers don't. If you don't understand how the production is, then how can you understand how to create the artwork? So that will put you a step ahead if you know that things have to be done in separations, or if it's mainly a company that prints digitally, that you have to know how to work in Photoshop. Just those really kind of basic things like how's it made,
Yeah. I mean, that's something I wish they would teach more in schools. I think for a designer looking for a job, they're not going to have that opportunity to get into a factory. So in terms of getting a job into the company, just really study like, what does that product look like? And then be able to offer your interpretation of that product or a new spin.
Right. But like even knowing, for instance, if you want to be a designer that designs, let's say, bedding, then you have to understand from interiors, like what's the scale? What's the appropriate scale?
Yeah.
What's the trending colors? What is the appropriate repeat? Do you know how to create that repeat in Illustrator? Like all of those things are just added, information that will make you more desirable if you can understand the product from beginning, how it's actually created, from paint to paper to scan to the programs that create the repeats to it being produced in India or wherever it's being produced, and then how is that marketed to the people? Is that even a trend or a color that they want? So you have to know that whole full circle, which is I don't know if they're teaching that in the schools, but that's what they should be teaching.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just really, an easy way to do it. Lately, I've been looking at what's trending at Etsy. I mean, just to kind of, I'm like, okay, this is a really good look at what a lot of people in the U.S. are buying. I mean, there are easy ways to do it.
Right.
Or that the site House.
Oh, we probably shouldn't talk about them. I'm not a fan.
But I'm just saying,
not done a good thing to designers, let's just say.
No, but if you want to see, for somebody like me, who's just looking at what people are buying, what is the number one color for a kitchen? Okay, I found the site helpful just for that, just to hear what people are doing. I've also heard how they really are not.
Yeah, on the backs of all the designers out there, it's not been a pretty thing. Well, that's another topic for another conversation.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, for a young designer, like look at what's out there. It's all out there on the net now.
Right, look at what's out there, but then don't copy it.
Like, no. I mean,
and we have that issue. That's a whole other topic too. Yeah,
that's something I'm dealing with a lot.
Yeah,
because young designers go to Pinterest and then they take something, and it happens in Asia quite a bit where they.
So that's what I was wondering. Like, do you see a lot of that when you're in the factories? Do you see a lot of knockoffs happening?
Yeah, and what they don't understand is, I think like the U.S. is like some distant planet. It's like, no, we get the same internet you do. So you steal it, we're going to see it like 2 seconds later. Hello.
Right. Oh, geez. I know. I mean, I've had my stuff copied. It's just, we're going to have a talk about that at another time, because that, I think, is its own animal right there. But you can't let that stop you either. No. You've got to just keep creating and take it as a somewhat compliment. I don't know. Hardly a compliment, but well, Angie, this has just been such a joy and such a pleasure. And I just feel my sister smiling on us right now. And I'm just so happy that this has just been the most interesting conversation. And I know everybody will love hearing about it. I will have all of your artwork on my blog post as well, and people can find you there. So I just thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your story and for being such a good friend, and because you're making such beautiful art and putting it out there. The world needs it, and it needs you, and I'm just so grateful. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and Louise and you have been angels in my life, and so I'm happy to be able to do this. It's a great honor for me.
Thank you so much. Oh, geez. I made it all the way through without crying. Geez. Oh, okay. So let's sign off here. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you like this podcast and you'd like to support it even more, you can join me over on patreon.com/Marie Robeson and become a patron of mine. If you're a patron of mine, you'll receive bonus episodes every month, only for patrons. You'll also receive 20% off all the merchandise in my online shop, marierobeson.bigcartel, and you will be receiving free printables every month that will be of my artwork, and they're some really fun things. You can follow along on Instagram and you can see what I'm creating just for my patrons. I would deeply appreciate it. It would help me keep the lights on, and it would help me pay all the fees that it takes to put together a podcast like this, so that I can keep supporting all the artists, keep bringing you great information, keep paying it forward to the next generation of artists. It's just a wonderful thing, and I would really deeply appreciate your support.